Chapter 7. A Dead Man's Room. Early the next day, I woke up to the sound of the telephone ringing. It was Amelia. "Things have changed," she said. "You need to leave your hotel immediately. There's already a car on its way to you." I pulled back the curtains that January morning and looked out at a sea and sky as grey as death. Below, 2 cars drove up and stopped outside the hotel. 2 men got out of the first car, and one of them was holding a television camera. I got dressed, packed my suitcase, and was downstairs by 8:45 a.m., an hour after the first ferry had arrived at Vineyard Haven. By that time, the lobby was full of newspaper and television reporters. I bought a newspaper and went into the hotel restaurant to read it. Lang was on the front page. Ex-Foreign Secretary says Adam Lang approved the use of torture by the CIA. The article said that the White House fully supports the ex-Prime Minister at this difficult time. But it was the last paragraph that made me forget to drink my coffee. Mr. Lang's memoirs will now be published at the end of April. John Maddox of Reinhardt Publishing said, "This is going to be a world publishing event. Adam Lang will be the first leader to give the real story about the war on terror." I went out through the lobby to the front of the hotel and telephoned Rick. "He's not in the office. He's on holiday," I was told. The minivan took me out of Edgartown. As we got nearer to the forest, I could see a group of demonstrators at the side of the road. They saw the minivan and ran towards us. "Lang! Lang!" shouted a woman. "Liar! Liar!" The Edgartown police tried to get us through the crowd, but people were hitting and kicking the minivan. There was a man in the crowd being interviewed by a TV reporter. He turned and looked at the minivan, and I thought he looked familiar. Then we were past and moving through the trees towards the house. Once I was back inside the house, Amelia took me to a bedroom at the back of the building. "It's Michael Macar's old room," she said. "I'm afraid his clothes are still in the wardrobe. We haven't had time to do anything with them yet." "Isn't there another room that I could use?" I said. There was something about using a dead man's room that I didn't like. "There are only 6 bedrooms in the house," said Amelia. She looked at her watch. "Sidney Crowell will be arriving soon, and the ICC will be making a statement in 30 minutes. Come up when you've unpacked your things." Crowell had flown in from Washington on a private jet, and when I got to the sitting room, Adam and Ruth Lang were sitting opposite him. Amelia and I sat down in chairs near them. The large TV on the wall showed a picture of the house. The cameraman taking the picture was in a helicopter. We could hear it in the sky outside. "I talked to John Maddox, and he's right," said Kroll. "We really have to explain everything in the memoirs now. It's the best way, Adam." "What exactly are they planning to investigate me for?" asked Lang. "War crimes, probably," said Kroll, and there was a moment of silence. "The ICC can't bring American politicians to trial because America doesn't accept the ICC as a court of law. So instead, they're going to investigate one of America's closest friends. You, Adam." "But I didn't order anyone to be kidnapped or tortured," said Lang. "Perhaps they could charge the United States with that, but not Great Britain." "A person can be punished for helping to make it possible for someone else to do or try to do that," explained Kroll. "And Reichardt's given the ICC documents which show that Adam did help the CIA," said Ruth. "Well, Adam's not in danger if he stays in America," said Kroll. "Wait a minute," said Lang. "Are you saying that I can't leave the United States?" "It's best that you don't travel to any country that accepts the International Criminal Court as a court of law. Yes," said Kroll. "But that's nearly every country in the world," said Lang. "Not America," said Kroll, "or China, Iraq, North Korea, Indonesia, Israel, and some parts of Africa. "I think something is happening," Amelia said suddenly, and she turned up the sound on the TV. And so we heard the ICC's chief prosecutor announce that Adam Lang was going to be investigated. Afterwards, the TV picture went back to the helicopter's view of Reinhardt's beach house. "You should go to Washington immediately, Adam," said Kroll. Lang was still staring at the TV. "We shouldn't have come here," he said. "It looks as if we're hiding." "I agree," said Kroll. "We'll say that you're going to Washington for a meeting that was arranged weeks ago." "I think that's a terrible idea," said Ruth. "The British people will think Adam's running to the president for protection from the ICC. We should fly back to London. The British government will have to support you." "You're wrong," said Amelia. "Look," she pointed at the television. The words moving across the bottom of the screen read, "British government to cooperate fully with war crimes investigation." "And will they cooperate fully if the ICC arrest me?" asked Lang. "They have to," said Kroll. "Then I don't have a choice." "I have to go to Washington," said Lang. "I still think it would look bad," said Ruth. "Not as bad as being arrested as I arrive in London," said Lang. "But better than running away," said Ruth. "So fly back a bag for me," and Lang angrily. "I'll stay here where people want me. Amelia, tell the people we're leaving in 5 minutes. Get one of the girls to pack a bag for me, and you'd better pack one for yourself." "Oh, why don't the two of you share a suitcase?" screamed Ruth. Silence. Then a red-faced Amelia picked up her notebook and walked quickly out of the room. Ruth waited until she had gone, then left without speaking. Lang sighed heavily and stood up. "I'll see you tomorrow," he said to me. Kroll also stood up and then grinned at me. "Happy ghosting," he said. Chapter 8. Lambert's Cove. I watched the pictures on the television and saw that the Edgartown police were keeping the demonstrators on the opposite side of the road to the house. Suddenly, the Jaguar drove out through the gates. It stopped, and Lang got out and went across to the TV cameras and reporters. "I'm sorry you've had to wait so long," he told them. "Lang! Lang!" came the shouts of the demonstrators. "Liar! Liar!" "I support the International Criminal Court," said Lang, "and I'm not afraid because I've done nothing wrong." He looked across at the demonstrators. "I'm travelling to Washington to continue with my work, but to everyone watching this in the United Kingdom, let me say this. I shall always fight terrorism, even in the courts." Then he turned and walked back to his car. It was like watching a great actor, I thought. I went downstairs to my room. As I was passing one of the other bedrooms, I heard the sound of a woman crying. It was Ruth. There was a box file on my bed and a note that read, "Good luck, Amelia." I opened the box and saw Memoirs by Adam Lang printed on the first page. I took the manuscript from the box, then took my laptop from my shoulder bag. Next, I took out the typed pages from yesterday's interviews with Lang. After some minutes thinking, I took a deep breath and began to write. I became a politician out of love. Love for a woman who came knocking at my door one wet Sunday afternoon. I looked out of the window and saw Ruth walking quickly towards the beach, her head down against the wind. Her security man was behind her. I watched her for a minute, then went back to work. At around lunchtime, I stopped writing and stood up. Moments later, I found myself taking Makara's clothes from the wardrobe and putting them on a chair. It suddenly seemed important to get everything of his out of that room. There was a big old suitcase inside the wardrobe, so I took it out and opened it. It was empty, except for a large, thick envelope addressed to Makara with the words Adam Lang Papers, Cambridge on the front. I opened it and pulled out some photographs. There were a number of pictures of Lang when he was in the university theatre group, the Footlights. There were also some newspaper reports about the elections in 1977 and Lang's first party membership card, which was dated 1975. 1975? That was 2 years earlier than the London elections. I started to look more carefully at the election reports then. In one picture, there was a group of election volunteers, and I could see Lang among them. So Lang had lied. He was pretending that he'd gone into politics because he'd fallen in love with a pretty girl. But he'd been a party member for 2 years by the time he met Ruth. Did it matter? Lang probably thought it made a better story, but Makara must have had suspicions about the story. He had asked for these extra photos and papers to be sent, and the story certainly wasn't in Lang's memoirs, and that surely wouldn't have pleased Lang. I looked again at the Footlights photographs. One was a picture of 8 young people on a stage, 2 women and 6 men. Their names were on the back of the photo. G.W. Syme, W.K. Innes, A. Park, P. Emmett, A.D. Martin, E.D. Vaux, H.C. Martineau, A.P. Lang. Under the names was a telephone number, probably written by Makara. I hesitated for several moments, then dialed the number on my mobile phone. From the ringing sound, I realised it was an American number. A man answered. "Richard Reichardt," he said. "Who is this?" He sounded suspicious. Shocked, I hung up immediately and dropped the phone onto the bed. After 30 seconds, it began to ring. I picked it up and switched it off without answering it. Had Makara written down the number? I couldn't be sure. I looked at the envelope to see when it had been sent. It had left the United Kingdom on the 3rd of January, 9 days before Makara died. I put the photographs and newspaper election reports back into the envelope, pushed the package under the bed, and went down to the kitchen. I ate a sandwich and took some time to think. Ruth hadn't arrived in London until 1976, when Lang was already a party member. So what had made him join the party? I knew now that it couldn't have been Ruth, so I'd spent half the morning writing about something that hadn't happened. Then I began thinking about Makara and how he had died. Did he hit rocks, or was he thrown straight up onto soft sand? What was the name of the place where he'd been found? Lambert's Cove. It was about 16 kilometres away, according to a map I'd found at the house. Maybe I would go and have a look at it. The housekeeper told me that there were bicycles kept in the garage for guests to use. When I opened the garage door, I saw the Ford Escape SUV that Makara had taken onto the ferry. For a moment or two, I thought about using it instead, but I left it there and took a bicycle. When I got to the gate, I saw that most of the demonstrators had gone. There was just one man left, and I recognised him immediately. It was the man who had sworn at me in the hotel bar. He saw me and shouted, "Wait a minute!" But I didn't stop. The sky was dark with storm clouds, and the wind was getting stronger. Most of the houses on the road down to Lambert's Cove were holiday homes and were closed up for the winter. After I'd been cycling for about an hour, it started to rain so hard that I couldn't see where I was going. I left the bicycle by a gate and ran up to the veranda of what I thought was an empty house. But a moment later, the door opened and an old man with thin white hair looked out. I started to say that I was sorry to disturb him when he said, "That's okay. You can shelter from the rain. Are you British?" "Yes," I said. "So, what are you doing in this part of the island?" he asked. "I'm going to Lambert's Cove," I said. "I knew the man who fell off the ferry." "That was a strange thing," he said. "The sea would never have brought that guy this far west at this time of year." I turned to look at him. "Really?" I said. "Did you tell that to the police?" "Young man," he said, "at my age, I have better things to do with my time. But I did tell Annabeth Wormbrand. It was she who told the police about the lights." "The lights?" I said. "The lights the night the body appeared on the beach," he said. "What sort of lights?" I asked. "Well, flashlights, I suppose," he said, "moving around on the beach." "The newspapers and TV didn't report anything about flashlights," I said. "That's because Annabeth has never spoken to a reporter in her life," he said. "Can you tell me how to find her house?" I asked. "Sure, but she's not there. She's in hospital," he said. "She fell downstairs 2 weeks ago, and she's in a coma. The doctors say she'll never wake up again." I stared at him, suddenly feeling sick. Then I said, "Thanks for letting me shelter on your veranda." I turned and ran towards my bicycle. "Hey!" he shouted, but I didn't look back. About half a kilometre further down the road near the beach, there was a big, low house. There were no lights on inside it, and I guessed that this was Annabeth Wormbrand's home. Could it be true? Had she seen lights? It would certainly be possible to see the beach from the upstairs windows. I cycled down to the beach. The sound of the crashing waves was very loud now. I thought about Makara, alone and face down in the sand, his clothes full of water. I imagined his body being thrown from a small boat and pulled up the beach by men with torches. And then I imagined those same men coming back a few days later to throw Annabeth Wormbrand down her stairs. Some distance along the beach, 2 people were walking towards me. The tall one was a man, the short one a woman. After a minute, I saw that the woman was Ruth Lang. At first, the noise of the wind and sea made it impossible to hear her until they got nearer. "What are you doing?" she shouted. "The housekeeper told me you had come here." "I wanted to see the place where Makara was found," I shouted back. "Why? You didn't know him." "I was curious," I replied. "We've come to fetch you back before the storm gets worse." She turned and shouted at the security man with her. "Barry, bring the minivan round and meet us on the road. We'll bring the bicycle up and find you." "I can't do that, Mrs. Lang," he shouted back. "I have to stay with you all the time." "Don't be stupid," she shouted. "There are no terrorists here. Go and get the van." He didn't look happy, but he turned and began to run back the way that they had come. Ruth and I walked up towards the road. "I've come here once or twice myself," she said, when we were away from the noise of the sea. "I usually bring a few flowers. Poor man." She stopped and looked at me. "Do you think Michael's death was suspicious?" she asked. "I'm not sure," I said. I was surprised by the question, but stopped myself telling her about the old man or about Annabeth Wormbrand. This was not the time or the place. So instead I asked, "Why was Makara on the ferry?" "I don't know," she said. We walked on silently. Suddenly, I had a thought. Had Makara left the island to visit Richard Reichardt in New York? That would explain Reichardt's telephone number on the back of the photograph and why he hadn't told the Langs where he was going. Barry was waiting for us on the road. We put the bicycle in the back of the van, then I sat next to Ruth on the journey back to the house. She didn't speak, but she did something unexpected. She put her cold hand in mine. Chapter 9. The Photograph. I went to my room and decided that I needed a hot bath. While I was in the bathroom, lying in the water, I was surprised to hear someone come into the bedroom. "It's me," called Ruth. I've brought you some dry clothes. Dinner will be ready in an hour." "Okay," I called back. "Thank you." After she left the room, I got out of the bath. She had put a shirt and a pair of jeans on the bed. The shirt had Lang's initials, APBL, on the pocket. My wet clothes had gone. I looked under the bed. The envelope was still there. I put on the dry clothes, sat down at the desk, and looked through Makara's manuscript. I read to page 50 before there was any mention of Ruth. I first met Ruth Capel at the time of the London elections. She was very politically active and was much cleverer than me. I immediately liked her, and after several evenings knocking on doors and giving out election leaflets, I persuaded her to come to a pub for a drink. A year after the elections, I asked her to marry me, and our wedding was in June 1979. I looked through the rest of the chapters and put a line under the places where she was mentioned. There were very few. Perhaps she had guessed that I'd want to put in more about her, and that was the reason she wanted me to write the new memoirs. I checked my watch and saw that it was already time for dinner. I put the manuscript away and went upstairs. Ruth was reading a magazine, and there was a bottle of white wine on the low table in front of her. I sat down on the sofa, and she poured me a glass of wine. "We'll eat in 20 minutes, she said, switching on the television. "First, we must watch the news." A picture of Lang in Washington, D.C. with the US Secretary of State appeared on the TV screen. Amelia Bligh was standing behind the two men. The Secretary of State began to speak. "Adam Lang has worked with us in the war on terror, and I'm proud to stand beside him this afternoon," he said, holding out his hand. "Adam, it's good to see you." "Don't grin, Adam," Ruth said to the television. "Thank you," said Lang, grinning and shaking the hand. "It's good to see you." Ruth swore and was about to switch off the TV when Richard Reichardt's face appeared on the screen. He was nearly 60, a little older than Lang, and had grey hair, but was quite good-looking. "I watched the announcement in The Hague today," he said, "with great shock and sadness. Adam Lang was, and still is, an old friend." "Liar!" Ruth shouted at the television. "But this is about justice," he finished. Ruth turned off the television as her mobile phone started to ring. She looked at it. "It's Adam, calling to ask me what I think." She turned off the phone. "Let him wait." "Does he always ask your advice?" I said. "Always," she said. "He used to listen to it, but not now." "You were right," I said. "He shouldn't have gone to Washington." "He should never have come here," she said. We had dinner at the long table by the window, silently at first. Then Ruth said, "How are you getting on with the book?" "Not very well, to be honest," I said. "I find it difficult to understand Adam. At the age of 18, he goes to Cambridge with no interest in politics at all. He spends all his time acting and drinking and meeting girls. Then, suddenly, by the time he's 22 or 23, he's a member of a political party." "Why?" "Didn't you ask him?" she said. "He told me that he joined because of you," I said. "He said that he followed you into politics because of love." "I could understand that if it were true." "Isn't it true then?" she asked. "You know it isn't," I said. "He was a member of the party for at least a year before he met you." "Was he?" she said. "But I do remember knocking on his door. After that, he did start coming to meetings. Maybe he joined in 1975, wasn't very interested in it, then he met you and became more interested. But what made him join in 1975? Is all this important?" she asked. "Yes, it is," I said, "because it means he isn't quite who we think he is. I'm not sure he's quite who he thinks he is, and that's really difficult when I've got to write his memoirs." "How do you know that he joined in 1975? she asked. There seemed to be no reason not to tell her. Makara found his original membership card and some newspaper reports about the 1977 elections. They were with all the other papers in Cambridge. We ate in silence for some minutes. Then she said, "In 1975, his mother and father were both dead and he'd left university. Many of his acting friends were getting work, but he wasn't. He got very depressed. I think he went into politics because he couldn't succeed as an actor. Quite a lot of people become politicians because they can't succeed in other jobs." "Did you ever want to be a politician?" I asked. "Of course," she said. "I've always understood more about politics than Adam has, but I soon realised that he was the great speaker, not me, and that people liked him. Now, show me this research of Michael's. I'm interested." I went down to my room and got Makara's envelope. When I returned, Ruth had moved back to the sofa. I opened the envelope and took out the photographs, Lang's membership card, and the reports about the London elections. She picked up the membership card. "Well, that's definitely his signature," she said. She looked through the photographs slowly, smiling. Then she held out the picture with the telephone number on the back. "What's this telephone number?" she asked. I felt my face getting hot. I should have told her about it earlier. Now I look guilty. "It's Richard Reichardt's," I said quietly. I rang it. She looked shocked. "You've been talking to Richard Reichard?" "I haven't," I said. "Makara must have written the number down." "When did you discover this?" she asked. "Earlier today," I said. "And then you went to Lambert's Cove," she said quietly. "Why did you do that?" "I'm not sure." I told her about the old man I'd met near the cove, and also about Annabeth Wormbrand. "She's in a coma," I said, "so she can't tell the police anything. That's all I know." She was silent for a moment, and then she said, "I'm going for a walk. This is serious, and I need to think." "I'll come with you," I said. "No," she said. "I need to be on my own." Very early the next morning, I heard someone knocking on my bedroom door. "Are you awake?" said Ruth quietly. "Yeah, I am now," I said. "Wait a minute." I put on the dressing gown that was hanging up in the bathroom. Then I opened the bedroom door. "What time is it?" I asked when she came in. "I don't know. I couldn't sleep. I've just spoken to Adam." She was also wearing a dressing gown and she was shaking. "I haven't told anyone this, not even the police." "What?" I asked. "The day before Michael died, he and Adam had a terrible argument," she said. "What was it about?" I asked. "I don't know," she said. "When I asked Adam about it, he refused to tell me. But a few minutes ago, when I told him that Michael had talked to Reichardt before he died, he didn't even pretend to be surprised. He knew." "He said that?" I asked. "He didn't need to," she said. "I knew by the sound of his voice. He said that he couldn't talk about it on the telephone, but we should talk when he gets back. Dear God, what has he done?" We were silent for a few moments while we both thought about the situation. "What are you going to do about all this?" she asked. "About Adam?" "Nothing," I said. "If he wants to tell the truth about things that have happened, then I'm here to help. If he doesn't, that's okay too." "But if something illegal has happened?" "I don't know that anything illegal has happened," I said. "All I have is a phone number on the back of a photograph and the words of some old man. If anyone has any evidence, it's you. What are you going to do about it?" "I don't know," she said. After a pause, she added, "I'll get a divorce. Then Mrs. Bly can visit him in prison." I looked at her for several moments, then put my suitcase onto the bed and opened it. "What are you doing?" she said. "I'm going back to the hotel," I said. "I can work better there." She stared at me. Then, without speaking, she turned and walked from the room. I looked at the manuscript. I wasn't supposed to take it from the house, but I couldn't really work without it. I put it in my suitcase. It was raining outside, and I didn't want to walk all the way to Edgartown, but nor did I want to have to ask Ruth to arrange transport. Then I remembered the Ford Escape SUV in the garage. It was still there, and the key was in it. I put my suitcase in the car, and then got into the driver's seat. As I drove down the forest road, the little map on the satellite navigation screen suddenly came on. "In 200 yards," said an American woman's voice, "turn right. Then, in 50 yards, turn right. And then, turn right." She was silent for the next few kilometres, and I forgot about her. But as I was about to turn right to enter Edgartown, she said, "In 200 yards, turn left." Her voice made me jump. "In 50 yards, turn left. Turn left." She was beginning to annoy me. "No," I said, and turned right into Main Street. "Turn around," she said. I stopped the car and tried to switch the voice off, but the screen changed from the map to a menu with different choices. Enter a new destination, return to home address, or remember last destination. I stared at it for a few moments, then chose remember last destination. "Turn around," came the voice again. I sat thinking for a short time. Had Makara been the last driver to put in an address? I couldn't be sure. I turned the Ford around. Once I was out of Edgartown and onto the Vineyard Haven Road, the voice stayed silent for several minutes. I drove on through the rain until the road got narrower under the trees. "In 200 yards, turn right," she said. "In 50 yards, turn right. Turn right." I turned down the hill into Vineyard Haven and then found myself on the dock where a queue of cars was driving onto the ferry. Someone knocked on the window next to me. It was the man from the ticket office. "You'll have to hurry," he said. "The ferry leaves at 8:15 a.m. and the weather's getting bad. There may not be another for some time." After a moment's thought, I got out of the car and bought a ticket. I got a coffee on the ferry and sat in a corner of the bar so I could think. I knew that I should phone Reinhardt's house and tell Ruth I'd borrowed the car. But I didn't want to give my reasons for being on the ferry. Also, was I in any danger? If Makara had put the last address into the satellite navigation, then he hadn't returned from that journey alive. When I drove the car out into the wind and rain of Woods Hole, the satellite screen told me to go north in the direction of Boston. So Makara hadn't been driving to New York to see Reichardt, I thought. I drove on for over an hour, still following the instructions from the satellite navigation. Finally, the voice told me to turn right onto a very quiet road through some woods. Some minutes later, the voice simply said, "You have reached your destination."